And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to Tuesday mornings Off the Ball AM. OTBAM is with you every morning. If you want to just listen to us on the radio, then feel free to go on to offtheball.com and hit the big play button in the top right hand corner, and you can boom us through your speakers or your headphones or however it is that you listen to radio in the mornings. Owen is here after a weekend at Electric Picnic. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
Very well. I'm just going to test you now, little bits and pieces about, you know, what's your name? What day of the week is it?
What are your motor skills like right now, sort of thing? I could easily pass all those tests, yeah.
Did somebody tie your shoelaces for you this morning? Are they actually tied?
No, they're just tucked into my shoe. I couldn't tie my shoelaces this morning, to be honest with you.
How good a weekend was it?
It was very good, yeah. The what?
Your voice broke.
Yeah, it did break. I'm almost getting Ger Gilroy's 7:45 a.m. voice. That's how bad I am this morning. So, yeah, no, it was great. It was like
good weather,
good sunshine, good music, an average All-Ireland final, which was like the first year I've ever actually gone to put aside a couple of hours to actually go and watch most of it. And it was kind of as everybody expected, really, wasn't it? It was kind of, you could call it the low light of the weekend.
Did you stay there did you watch the whole match?
Yeah, like I had a really bad position at the back of the tent that was showing it because I got there late. But so many Dublin fans there. A couple of Tyrone fans there who left after about 55 minutes, and at which point all the Dublin fans turned to them and started cheering cheerio, 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 which just got increasingly awkward because the two Tyrone people were struggling to actually get themselves out of the tents because they couldn't find a good route to get out of there. So it really rubbed salt in the wounds, and I'm sure that was the case in Croke Park on Sunday. And
was there a lot of talk about Roy Keane over the course of the weekend, or was it all Kendrick Lamar?
Well, it was all more Kendrick than Roy Keane, to be honest. A bit of Roy Keane as well. I suppose you had the kind of the rumour mill in full flow over the course of the weekend, as I'm sure was the case outside of that arena. So yesterday then, when I got out of there, I was like, all right, okay, some of this is actually real then. And that's here we are now, Roy Keane giving us a fresh news cycle.
Yeah, which bits are real we'll get into in the papers because Martin O'Neill came out fighting on Roy Keane's behalf yesterday. Before we go, Kendrick, how good? What was that like?
Without getting into hyperbole, he is probably the best rapper we have in the world right now. He's just so good. He's at the point in his career where everybody knows all his songs, so it's just an unbelievable atmosphere. He is outrageously good, and you just can't overstate it as to the point of how good he is right now. So yeah, that was an exceptionally good booking by them. I'm not sure how much they actually paid to get him there, but yeah, one of the highlights for sure, and I think that was the same for everybody.
Anything else?
Jungle were probably my highlight of the weekend. I'm not sure if you've seen them at all. They're a brilliant band. Probably my fourth or fifth time seeing them at this point, and they just get better and better every time. Kind of at that point as well where they're starting to build up a volume of tracks where everybody starts to know them. So yeah, exceptional stuff all around here.
And was a sense that the picnic has got like much younger? Was that feel old?
Well, yeah, it's kind of this is a new departure for my friends and I at this point, where a few of them were starting to say that they started to feel old at the picnic. I personally didn't. I personally said no, actually I haven't felt like that yet, but there was a few voices saying this is the first year where I've started to feel a little bit old. Yeah. Not me though, I'll be back again next year.
Yeah, all right. Let's tell you what's coming up on the show today. Michael Calvin has been talking to us about his new book. When you did that interview, what's...
Yeah, so State of Play, it's Michael Calvin.
We're doing that interview?
It was only last week. Well, actually, everything from last week is just a blur at this point. It's an interesting one because he talks to so many huge names in the sport, from the likes of Dele Alli to Steven Gerrard, gets a few quotes from Arsene Wenger, Sean Dyche as well, and just compiles a selection of different talking points that are particularly poignant at the moment with the direction football is going. And through those stories he tells throughout different chapters these really important tales, and some of them are exceptional, and most of them, to be honest with you, are actually great stories from the lesser lights in the story. Like, for example, Jeff Astl's daughter, Dawn Astle, is the interviewee in the very first chapter, in the chapter about CTE.
Yeah.
And I think even just the placement of that chapter at the very start of the book kind of is very telling as to the tone of the book, that this is serious business, this is straight into it. There's no sort of rosy introduction that football is the beautiful game and all that sort of stuff. There are some very grim realities that footballers have faced over the last couple of decades, and these issues are going to become more apparent over the next few years. All
right, we're also going to hear from the Irish Rugby captain Rory Best a little bit later on as well. And Graham Hunter makes his long-awaited return to OTBAM. He's going to be with us here on OTBAM every week. And this morning, around about 9 o'clock, if the Wi-Fi connection on his boat is strong enough, because he's on holidays, then we'll float you some European football news. If you have any questions for Graham, now would be a good time to get them in. In the meantime, though, let's bring in the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
Yeah, so where to begin? This is another fairly busy Tuesday morning with the newspapers. Going to start here with the Irish Independent Sports section. So on the right-hand side there, you can see, is that 18 All-Ireland medals between them? Michael Darmaccauley, Eoin O'Gara and Bernard Brogan with Sam Maguire and the Lord Mayor's chain of office on stage during the Dublin homecoming at Smithfield last night. And then Declan Darcy has been saying that they're absolutely open to the return of Diarmuid Connolly to the panel. There's no issues from our end. It's an amateur sport. There are no having to do things. It's all about choices. He decided this year he needed to take a little bit of time away, and he should have been allowed that, and we allowed him to do that. Jack McCaffrey, Rory O'Carroll left us. The same rules would apply to those players as Diarmuid. There was definitely a sense that he will have to win his way back onto the panel. You know, that it won't just be like you automatically get back in to where you were. But I don't know. He seems to be in pretty good shape. He'd be a good player to have around when you're trying to get over the hump for a 5 in a row. And then the other side of that story, obviously, is this massive brewing story. Keane bust up with Arthur, puts O'Neill on the defensive. So that's Dan McDonald from yesterday's press conference where Martin O'Neill said, yeah, there was a row with Harry Arthur. He named Arthur in the squad. In the Mail, it says that he actually went to see Harry Arthur in person to try and convince him or to sort it out. And then Arthur said, look, I'm going to step away for the moment. But O'Neill also said that he'll decide if Arthur gets asked again, as opposed to Arthur deciding that he'll play again because he's the manager. So positions seem to have become entrenched, and you've got to think that it would be a miracle if Harry Arthur plays again under the current management setup.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is we're not in a position to afford to allow this to happen where a manager has to make almost a political decision within his own camp. Does he back his assistant manager or does he back one of his Premier League players? What a shit position to be in, and it's not some place we should be in at this moment in time, because we're screwed really when it comes to top level talent. And relatively, when you look at the rest of the Ireland panel, Harry Arthur is top level talent. Declan Rice is top level talent. It's 2 out of 9 Premier League players that have not jumped ship, but have potentially been shunned over the past week or so. It's a desperate situation. Like, you kind of have a small bit of sympathy for Martin O'Neill in that press conference yesterday, where he's going to get asked about it, of course, but in his head he's thinking, God, I can't throw Roy Keane under the bus now, because if I do that, then you might have to do that to get Harry Arthur back into the fold, or if I'm going to throw Harry Arthur under the bus, then I'm backing up Roy Keane. So it's kind of this implicit political situation which just is not nice.
Yeah, and the other thing that came up yesterday, we talked about the different stories that were out there about the Declan Rice scenario. And so the stories, just to reiterate yesterday, the one that had been in the newspaper was that Rice had intervened somehow in the row between Arthur and Keane. And O'Neill goes on to say, the Ireland manager is also unhappy with reports claiming Rice got caught up in the row. I don't know where you got that line, that the young lad interfered in the discussion. That is totally and utterly untrue, said Martin O'Neill. There isn't an ounce of truth in it. I'm actually pleased you've asked me that question, because it gives me the chance to knock it on the head. Rice is a totally different situation. I would dearly like young Rice to play for us, and I'm giving him a bit of time. Rice was talked to by England, and I don't see how that couldn't affect a young kid born in that country. It's a totally different issue. Rice would have been pretty well certain to start in midfield for us. I don't think Harry was a certainty. Which is actually, I suppose, Harry wasn't a certainty if Rice is there, right? I mean, maybe he is. The other story wasn't, there was like a version of the story which was that he intervened. The other version of the story was that Keane had said something to him about his family leaving Cork, but in like a, Cork is amazing, why would your family ever leave Cork? And that somehow this has become the wedge issue that is driving Declan Rice away from Ireland into the, waiting arms laden down with cash that England are offering.
Yeah, well, looking at that, the conspiracy that is doing the rounds, and it's actually being put down in print, and it's not really much of a conspiracy, it's not a huge leap that David Kelly is suggesting there, is that it's surrounding 2 English-born players, and ultimately Roy Keane didn't have to say anything to Declan Rice for him to take something from his row with Harry Arthur, for example, that potentially he looks at, maybe if there was any poor treatment of Harry Arthur, Declan Rice might look at that and say, is that going to be me in a few years? Is that how I'm going to get treated in a few years? Maybe I don't want to actually be part of that. Like, maybe you can make that leap. And even if there was no row between Declan Rice and Roy Keane, you might be able to suggest that. So it's an odd one, so many varying stories. But Martin O'Neill, for sure, as you say there, has come down really hard on that particular angle.
Yeah, which, I mean, I think is fair enough, really. Loads of continuing All-Ireland football final reaction. Mickey Hart says that I feel hurt about this, but it's not the real hurt of loss. That's something much worse. So he's asking for people to put a bit of context on the defeat. He's also had to go with pundits. He's fed up with the childish descriptions of what is regarded as a marquee attacker. I just think it's a tired soundbite. It really is. This thing called marquee forwards. It's something of the past. It's not about being a marquee forward, it's about the number of quality finishers wherever they come from on the field. The marquee has maybe strength, but it's also going to be a great weakness. If you have a marquee forward and he's double teamed and stuffed out of the game, what do the rest of the people do? Do they say, ooh, our marquee forwards aren't getting 7 or 8 points when we're beaten? I think you need a spread of scores in the modern game with people capable of taking them, which is a fair point. I'd say if you're Mayo, you're like, yeah, shut up, everybody. I think there's really only 1 or 2 pundits who talk about they don't have that marquee forward. They just need that marquee forward. Like, well, you know, maybe in the 80s they did.
Yeah, like, is there not a bit of truth in the marquee forward point? The idea.
From Mickey Hart?
No, from pundits in general.
No.
That's like you can accept a lot of what Mickey Hart is saying there. Like, obviously you need a spread of scores. There's no question about that. But I don't think.
Who's Dublin's marquee forward?
Well, that's the thing. They've got. If you put any of those Dublin forwards into the Tyrone team, I'd like to know how marquee do they look. Like, it's very hard to tell. Are they also exceptional? But I do think Dublin is a little bit different. The way they play, the squad mentality, it's quite different. And maybe that would be unhealthy if Dublin had a marquee forward. But I would say that with everybody back, if Diarmuid Connolly comes back, he is their marquee forward. I would say Bernard Brogan was their marquee forward.
Yeah, except that the traditional sense of a marquee forward was that, like, your job was to stay at the edge of the square and score 1-6, 1-7 or 11 points, and you weren't expected to track back. Like, it's possible Paul Mannion is a marquee forward, but he's back in his full back line making goal-saving tackles, which is the type of thing that marquee forwards don't do. Like,
well, they should be. Like, I don't think.
Mickey Hart's point, though, yesterday after the game in his interview at Martrasa was that the wrong people were in the position to shoot at various times in that first half when they had a bit of dominance, and that was bad decision making. And the decision making that was something they worked on all year, but on the big day, the occasion seems to have got to them, and they made bad decisions. So basically, you have finishers, people who are allowed to kick the ball over from the scoring zones, and you work and work and work until you get that person in the scoring zone. If that person is your marquee forward, like, that's just terminology. But actually, that's more than likely your left half back or your right half back or one of the midfielders or one of the deep lying half forwards who kind of arcs around, finds himself in that position in loads of space, because that's how the team works. And then ultimately the whole notion of having a single forward inside, like Gooch, who you just ended up pumping the ball into back in the days of, and it's not really, it's even the previous generations that we're talking about, the 80s and the 90s, who had like marquee forwards where, I don't know, that's my take.
Yeah, maybe marquee player should be the new name, where you have.
Maybe we should just
Are you passionate about this?
We should just retire the whole marquee bullshit. Right, sorry about that. Apologies to the young ears listening in the car. Right, I have total confidence in Ryan.
That's the first time you've cursed since schools have actually gone on holidays back in whatever June.
I know, yeah, sorry about that. I have total confidence. O'Neill backs Keane and Arthur Rowe.
See, that's the thing. That now the battle lines have been drawn. Granted, it's just been drawn in the media. I'm not sure is that actually playing out behind closed doors. But ultimately, that's what this has led to. Like, you can talk about the end result on the pitch, which of course, in Ireland's case, is quite a significant one because these are a couple of our best players. But ultimately, behind the scenes, this has just created what shouldn't have been a divide. Even after the Declan Rice situation, if we take everything we've seen on face value, there shouldn't have been a divide. It was a one situation kind of carry on. And once the Declan Rice thing was sorted, whether he went or whether he stayed, that was that done. Whereas now you've got a wider political realm inside the Ireland camp, it seems. So it's just a disaster bridging out of this Declan Rice thing.
Which means suddenly that this match is way more important than it would have been. Like, it's just the Nations Cup. No one's taking it that seriously, although there is the possibility of getting into a playoff for the Euros at the end of it. Now all of a sudden it's like, you get hammered by Wales. That's not great.
Yeah, like, I'm sure Martin O'Neill would be desperate for the old format to return, that friendlies did exist and it was just a friendly this Thursday night. The kind of positive of it all is that the new format means that the actual qualifiers are a few months away and they're not actually arriving now, because otherwise it will be a game of even more consequence potentially just around the corner. So it's kind of a bit of column A, a bit of column B when it comes to winning and losing from Martin O'Neill's perspective in this. And he will kind of toe the party line if they do get hammered on Thursday, that it is just the Nations League. But ultimately, as you say there is qualification places at stake, playoff places, I should say, at stake with the Nations League. And like, there's every chance. Like, if Denmark weren't going to field amateur players potentially at the weekend or whatever.
You better explain that just in case anybody hasn't been paying attention to this. And why the hell would you be paying that much attention to Danish football except for this one time?
Yeah, like the Danish Football Federation.
They hammered us 5-1.
In a dispute with the Players' Union in Denmark, which Kasper Schmeichel and Christian Eriksen are a central part of when it comes to these talks. It's a dispute about image rights where Eriksen and Schmeichel, it seems, have conflicting interests commercially with some of the sponsors of the national team. So, for example, in the Ireland team, say 3 are the sponsor, and I don't know, a player might have a contract with Vodafone or whatever. So that's a situation. I'm not sure what the specific sponsors are in Denmark, but that's the situation. And they want, the likes of Eriksen and Schmeichel and the Players' Union want more individual commercial benefits than kind of a group mentality.
And they also want to make sure that no individuals, so that they won't be forced into it. So, that
autonomy for the individual really is what they want.
And also, but also in a weird way, like the security of the group, so that if they're like, they won't be forced to be the only person in an ad for 3 when actually they have their own contract with Vodafone, whereas actually they're happy, I think, to appear in that ad if there's like 5 or 3 teammates in it. So anyway, Messi's off the shortlist for World Player of the Year.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? Is he being punished for a World Cup performance? Doesn't seem that way, because you look at the rest of the shortlist. Are France really kind of pumped in there? Not really. Like, no Griezmann, as far as I'm aware. That's a like
Ronaldo, Luka Modric, Salah. Is Mbappe?
I don't think he is.
Well, that's
yeah, no, it is. So, like, that's the kind of contradiction there. It's like, okay, you can see why somebody might put a lot of weight in the World Cup and therefore Messi gets ruled out. But ultimately then you don't see any of the French lads there, so it's a bit of a strange one. I thought Messi did pretty well for Barcelona in the first half of this year. Like, the club season is just in swing at the moment, so you've got to judge the second half of last season. And like, I thought he was outstanding, so it's a strange one. And I don't know, it's public vote, I think, isn't it? So Ronaldo's got it in the bag.
Ireland may join bid for World Cup. This is this is interesting little mood music while the Brexit stuff is going on in the background. Ireland could be part of a joint bid for the 2030 World Cup with England and the other home nations, the Times Ireland reports this morning. The idea is being considered at senior levels in English football, and the FAI is understood to be open to an approach for detailed discussions on such a bid. Yeah, we'll chat to you. Yeah, no problem. Of course we will. This is interesting. The move has several advantages, including that Ireland could be a vote winner from countries that may not usually support the British associations. Well, I mean, if the Irish are supporting it, then, like, come on, we can all get behind this. Like, you know, they have some
greatest
history.
Fans in the world.
They have some history there. Especially those that may still hold a grudge about England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland having a separate status within FIFA. I mean, are there countries who are out there going, I can't believe that England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have separate status within FIFA. Screw you, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland for your separate status.
But of course there is. Of course, this is football bureaucracy.
Who's pissed off at that?
Well, would you be surprised if the bureaucrats at the top level of any nation in the world, we know what football bureaucracy is all about, are that petty?
Well,
that would not surprise me one bit.
It would also overcome the problem of including Northern Ireland as part of a UK-only bid. There is no suitable stadium in Belfast, but the 51,700-seater Aviva Stadium could easily host World Cup matches.
What about Croke Park?
It's coming home.
Is Croke Park too big to hold a World Cup game?
Only the final. We'll have the final, lads, but that's it. Not having any other.
Yeah.
No shitty group games.
Too good.
Especially not with an expanded, like, 600-team World Cup as it's going to be in 2030. No. We're not having Botswana versus Northern Ireland.
But do they automatically qualify all 5 teams if this joint bid was to be accepted? That would be an interesting kind of manoeuvre.
All in favour of that then?
Yeah, absolutely. There's also mentioned there in the article about concerns about different currencies, but I think that's not going to be an issue because 2026 has 3 different governments, 3 different currencies. That is Martin Ziegler, sorry. He's got a quote actually from, I think it's an FA source, who does mention that political kind of advantage of having Ireland there, that they've weighed up the negatives and they've weighed up the positives of having Ireland involved, and we think Ireland can add something to our exclusive group, so we're going to have them in there. So if this bid is going to go to the table, which I do believe is going to be the only UEFA bid, then Ireland are going to be involved, it seems, but the vote isn't even for another 4 years.
Yeah, so we've got 4 years of lobbying and talking about a potential World Cup match in Dublin, so, you know, we'll have Euros matches in Dublin for sure.
We'll get Liam Neeson to do the voiceover and try and, you know, take his record to 1-on-1.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's time for his comeback. The Irish news this morning for you. Here's a quick look at that. I hope I did them proud. McAllister reflects on emotional All-Ireland final display. And then the picture of the Tyrone homecoming there. Hart urges fans to keep their faith as he vows to bring Sam back to Tyrone. I suppose that was the other big news emerging from yesterday, is that Mickey Hart is definitely coming back for a 19th season in charge at Tyrone, having, he feels, got them so close. Tyrone's tactics made it plain sailing for Dublin, Jim McGuinness saying, which I think is a fair point, that like honesty of efforts, but like really, who was saying? Somebody in the office, was it Joseph, was saying that what they should have done was go 5-1 up and then go full McGuinness. Right, that's it. We're not scoring anymore. You're not scoring anymore. Let's see how good you are now.
Yeah, well, that
when they got the lead, it was like that was their chance.
It certainly would have been a lot better than what did occur. I think Jim McGuinness is really annoyed with how Tyrone actually went too man-to-man, that they marked their men too tightly almost, that there was one of their forwards marking a Dublin corner back, and they were looking up the pitch and they were like, oh, there's Jack McCaffrey making a run up the pitch. I'm going to make sure I've got my hand on Philly McMahon here and not actually track Jack McCaffrey back, that there was too much individualism going on there. So maybe a bit harsh in that regard when it comes to the mentality of Tyrone, looking out for themselves rather than their teammates. But there is kind of a nub of truth in that tactically, that perhaps going man-to-man all the time instead of just getting bodies behind the ball might not have been the smartest move, particularly after going 5-1 up.
Okay, so the Predel Arc is returning to Longchamp. It's been renovated and looks amazing, but it's more expensive to go this year, and so that's the lead on the racing post. What price a day at the Arc? It's interesting that. Like,
what is the answer to that?
80 quid. Well, 75 for the grandstand, which is still cheaper than Cheltenham Gold Cup and the Ascot. But they think that people are going to be very upset because the price is going up. 150% rise in standard price tickets from Shanty as opposed to. Anyway, a weird story.
Yeah, I certainly won't be going, that's for sure. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail is rare old times, songs and stories as delirious Dubs party hard into the night. And Ireland in the mix for the 2030 World Cup. That story's carried in there as well. Back page of the Herald this morning. It's Dubs all week, I'd imagine, with the Herald's Connolly door open. Dubs would welcome Diarmuid back, says Darcy, and Irish boss backs Roy over spat with Arthur. So Declan Darcy doing the rounds this morning, spoken to after at the homecoming yesterday, and the door is wide open for Diarmuid Connolly, but whether or not he's going to be able to walk through it is another thing.
What do you think?
It's going to be amazing from a Dublin perspective to have him back. This is the ideal situation.
Yeah.
Like, no team has ever been this well placed. Okay, I can't speak about the Wexford team or
no,
like
don't worry, it's fine.
Like, has been this well placed to do 5 in a row ever. In like, they're even in.
Kerry were pretty well placed, but like this, what they have here is like an all-time generational talent pissed off trying to win his place back in the team.
Well, I'm talking about when I say well placed. What I mean by that is that the sheer depth that they have, and it's actually getting wider and wider, or deeper and deeper as the years go by. Like, Kerry, like, I think Jimmy Deanahan was injured for that 1982 final, and I think a lot of people say that they
ruined them.
Well, it was a big loss.
On.
That if Dublin lost a big player in the lead up to next year's All-Ireland final, particularly in the forward ranks, they're like, well, it's fine. We did it last year without Diarmuid Connolly, and Diarmuid Connolly's back and flying for us this year. Like, who knows how good Bernard Brogan's going to be next year? Like, the people, I'd say a lot of people suspected that he'd do one more year, or maybe even retire, before the comeback this summer. But like, has there been a discussion about that over the last few days? I think everybody expects Brogan to be back.
I think you would expect everybody to at least go and try and make the team early in the year. So I think it's going to be a very interesting league campaign next year, and like that's where Gavin's going to have to manage the resources a bit and make sure that everybody doesn't come back peaking too soon. I don't know, that's what, like, from the outside, that's what it feels like. But they might be like, 5 in a row, we've done 4, we're as good as anybody else.
Yeah, like the golf as well is another thing. Jim McGuinness, just going back to his column, is saying that we should actually be talking probably about 6 or 7 in a row at this point.
Well, I was saying 7 yesterday. I think they should stop targeting 5, because then they'll stop at 5 or think, okay, that's fine, or suddenly next year becomes this like massive hype point, when in reality, like, change the conversation now and go, look, we're not into it. We don't want to win 5 in a row. We want to 7 in a row. And everybody will accuse you of arrogance for talking about that. But like, it takes a bit of the pressure off the 5.
There's absolutely no chance Dublin come out next year and say we want to win 7 in a row. Like, there's no chance to come out and say.
But they have to say we want to win 5 in a row, because like, of course we want to win the All Ireland,
Well, no, they're just going to say the same thing that they've said for the last few years, which is every All-Ireland counts. We were just focused on the process, and this All-Ireland is the only thing in our mind. That's what they're going to say all of 2019. And to be honest with you, that year-by-year basis is probably why they've won so many consecutive All-Irelands and why they're probably going to win a couple more. It's Roy Keane and Harry Arter pretty much in the rest of the newspapers here. Back page of the Mirror is right-hand man. O'Neill has total confidence in assistant boss Keane. You've also got I'll not tire of winning. Jack says the 4-in-a-row glory is his greatest achievement. Back page of the Irish Daily Star is keep calm and harry on. O'Neill backs Keane over Arter spat. McCaffrey says Dubs scrub up well. And Jack dampens Kingdom Link. It seems like Jack O'Connor is not going to be the next Kerry manager. Peter Keane has gone into favourite for
Right,
the post.
and what do you think of this?
Well, Peter Keane is the person that I would have been suggesting for the role beforehand.
Some talk about Jack O'Connor and Mayo. Is that a possibility? It's a long old drive.
It is a long drive. But would it be the longest drive in GAA? Is Davy's drive longer? Isn't Davy going over and back from Clare?
Yeah, I don't know. What?
Clare to Wexford longer than Kerry to Mayo?
Don't think so.
Like three from South Kerry as well. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Jack needs to get a holiday home in Lahinch or something to be the halfway point.
You could get a chopper. I mean,
well, that's certainly been done by Kerry managers in opposite counties before.
Terrace Talk last night. Interesting comment from Jack O'Connor tonight on Terrace Talk, where he revealed to me that he is content at the moment to remain involved with the under-20 side and looks forward to working with the younger players next season. Be sure to catch the podcast tomorrow if you missed it. Right, well, that's I don't want the job, right?
It seems like it. It also, I didn't hear the piece, but the Irish Daily Star is saying that he was kind of very reluctant to talk about it at the start, which means that he's obviously put some thought into it. And then eventually that quote comes out in the interview. So fair play to them for getting that out of him. It does seem like it's an I don't want it.
Is it though? It's hard. I don't understand the full nuances of who in the board you're talking to. Like, has the minor manager said he'd like the job?
He's been very cautious about saying things. What that comment definitely says to me is that Jack O'Connor has definitely not been approached for the Kerry senior manager job. If Jack O'Connor has definitely not been approached for the senior manager job, then Tim Murphy and the rest of the county board wanted to wait until Sunday. They wanted to wait until the minor campaign was done. Why the hell would they want to do that? Well, because they want Peter Keane to be in the conversation for the manager.
So is that how it works? You have a conversation with everybody and you go, what's your plan? Show us what your backroom team is going to be. How is it going to be different from what's just gone on? How is it going to be different from what you've done in the past? How au fait are you with what the challenge that Dublin offer you? Is there a full, come and have that conversation with a bunch of different people, or do you go after one person and say, you're our guy, we need you?
Well, you would like to think the latter. That's how good appointments work, isn't it?
No.
Well, what do you, I'm trying to think. You have your candidates, you have your list of people you want.
But everybody gets to
you speak to your target A, and you're like, we want you.
So you've prejudged the situation, you've come up with we know you are definitely the right person without actually having listened to all of the available opportunities.
Yeah, well, I would say that if you have a conversation with person A and they disappoint you, well, then you move down the list. Well, I don't know what the order is. It is... I just really do think that means that he has been spoken to by the county board. Though? Maybe it should be, but I think it is, ultimately it is up to the county board, and maybe they're kind of viewing this with an element of pressure. He said that himself, Tim Murphy, that this is going to be the biggest move of his entire tenure, and maybe he's thinking I better not balls this up, and I'm sure that is kind of the correct decision to not balls this up, but what have you got there?
A comment from Alan Cullen which says, you'll be back at Electric Picnic next year because you won't have any business in Croke Park like the rest of Kerry, Sheehan. You'll be looking on from afar as the Dubs do 5 in a row. #OTBAM. Zing.
Well, Kerry just did 5 in a row on Sunday is all I'm saying.
I can't see his profile pic from there, Tommy.
It's it's a Dubs banner.
Yeah.
It's a twiblet or whatever they call it. So yeah, well, fair point. I've got very little leg to stand on. I haven't been able to.
They've been relatively good winners over the years. I wonder, is this the year where that stops and they just start thumbing their nose and
Dublin?
Yeah.
They've been relatively good winners.
Yeah. They haven't really rubbed it in.
Let's just present yours comment without further comment there, because ultimately I've got no ammunition to fire back with success. They have got better at winning over the years. That's for sure. They've certainly got used to not losing, and that certainly helped them be a bit more humble in victory. The fans, that is. The players have always shown a lot of humility. Couple of UK back pages then. It's farewell to Alistair Cook, really, I think. Farewell to a hero.
Sure. 2019 won't the football final be in August anyway?
Well, that's it. There is no pub visit next year. Farewell to a hero. Michael Vaughan salutes Alistair Cook on his international retirements, and farewell to England's rock, says the back of The Guardian.
Goodbye, England's rock. Here's Billy Joe Padden talking about Dublin's dominance on last night's Off the Ball on Newstalk.
Billy Joe, is this a worry? Because this is different from 81. This is not a team. This is a county. This is an organisation. This is a structure. As we look ahead to the next decade or 2 or 3, you know, kind of the bulk of our lifetime, are we looking at 4, 5, 6 Dublin All-Irelands per decade now?
I think so. I think when you consider the way they're organised, the way their clubs in Dublin keep producing quality players, of course, Dublin with their population are always going to have, I suppose, an abundance of fine athletes that you could turn into Gaelic footballers. But I think on top of that, what you're seeing now is that their clubs are producing really, really skillful, intelligent players that maybe wasn't the case 20 years ago, even though they had a population base. And I think that they're so motivated. I think that all these players will learn from all these victories they've had over the last number of years, and it's just going to create a winning culture, and they're going to get stronger and stronger. And I think but at the same time, we can't blame Dublin for that. They're only making use of their resources in the best possible way that they can. I think other counties have to do the same thing, and I think it's a question for the GAA, not in the short term, but in the longer term or medium to long term, to look at, okay, what is the best thing for Gaelic football? Because at the end of the day, for it to thrive and be an interest to all 32 counties, you need a competitive spectacle. And we are in danger of it not being that way. I had felt throughout this year that Dublin were probably 8 points better than any team in the country, and I think that's the way it has played out.
Point, right. What is the point of the Senior Football Championship? Is it to provide entertainment for the country in Gaelic football terms, or is it supposed to be the spiritual coming together of the football culture of your county? Because if it's entertainment, change the rules and make it equal. But if it's like the true spiritual representation of who you are as a Gaelic football society, then stop messing with this and let everybody work things out. Help them as much as you can to work it out. You know, inject this proper strength and conditioning into every county, and away we go. But stop tinkering with the rules. But if it's an entertainment product, then change the rules.
Yeah, I think...
Darren, hello.
Why can't it be both?
That's what I was just about to say. It doesn't have to be black or white in this situation, does it? I think you have to go down a couple of layers into it to say that. So the process of the championship, the point of the championship is to crown the best winner by whatever means necessary. But then the point of every county board should be to play a brand of football which kind of captures the imagination of the people in your county, to capture the imagination of young players, and which might ultimately bring you success. So I think that's more on a localised level than it is on a national level. I would say that the CCCC, for example, not that they're an important part of this at all, but say if they're looking at it, they're saying, well, you know, it's the competition has included more games this year. The semi-finalists were the best semi-finalists out there. It was far more of a meritocracy than it's ever been. But ultimately there is a bigger divide than there's ever been as well. So there's a huge contradiction there. I think you can have a bit of both. I think that ultimately should the process of the whole championship be to entertain? Well, I think the idea of crowning the best winner is a little bit more important.
Yeah, I don't buy into the fact that the GAA is the people's game at senior inter-county level. It's clearly for the elite players, and their success shouldn't be wrapped up in whether or not people enjoy watching teams do stuff. There have been absolutely brilliant teams who have played a not exciting, open, expansive brand of football, but they've won All-Irelands in very meaningful ways that changed the game and changed the way we approach the game. And I just think because someone reinvents the game or how you could win it and has a different idea to maybe traditionalist view of, sure, we'll go man to man, we'll try to kick more points over than the other team and let's see how we get on. I think in elite sport, and that's what the championship is, it's for elite sports people. It is to crown the best sports team in the country.
To entertain us as people, to entertain the GAA community.
No, the GAA community are byproducts. The championship is a product for players. It is the showcase of the best players in the country. It doesn't matter. I don't think fans should factor into it when you're trying to decide how the game should be run.
But it's a community organisation, isn't that?
Well,
so isn't the counter argument to that is that this is a community organisation which is rooted in the community, and so therefore the matches in Croke Park are actually for the community to come hang out with each other and enjoy the best athletes that have come from that community.
Well, no, the point of the community is that each county, if you believe what they say when they say we do this for the fans, we do this for the people of, say, Tyrone, we do this for the people of Dublin, that's what we're doing this for, then you're doing it for them in terms of success. You're giving yourself the best chance of winning. And if Mickey Hart honestly believes on Sunday that the way Tyrone played was the best way they had of beating Dublin, whether you agree with that or not, then you can actually buy that idea. You can buy that idea that they were honestly in the belief that they were giving themselves the best chance of success, and therefore giving themselves the best chance of deriving happiness for their community.
Yeah, and so then that I think leads logically to the point that the rules of the game are totally fine, and that we don't need to go change it just for some entertainment value.
Yeah, like ultimately the reason why the rules are wanted to be changed is not because of Dublin's dominance, it's because of the reaction to Dublin's dominance. It's because teams wanted to take the best down, and currently it's on vogue to be very, very defensive to get to that end result.
Yeah, although
they've made meaningful changes though, Ger, I think, that have actually improved the game. Like the art of high fielding looked like it could die out with quick kickouts, and the way Stephen Cluxton decided that he'll hit the shortest man and retain possession first and foremost. But when the mark came in, it led to some ridiculously, like, really good high fielding.
Brian Howard made his catch in the second half right in front of us, and didn't even take a mark. Like, you were thinking, oh, just take the mark there, but like it was because there was a man running off him. It definitely helped a little bit, but I think that we tend to overstate, because so many teams actually have rediscovered the art of having good midfielders who can catch the ball again, and those kickouts are useful. Like,
that's not the one in front of his goals.
No, there was two.
Yeah,
there was two. So Darren's looking very fresh this morning, everybody, isn't he? You wouldn't think that this was a man out enjoying the celebrations in Smithfield last night. And how do you know, and how do I know that Darren was out there? Because here's Cian O'Sullivan's Instagram story from last night. Have a look at this. See if you can spot our intrepid reporter in the midst of all this.
I haven't seen this yet. Oh yeah, there we go.
There he is. This is Cian O'Sullivan. There you go. Look at this. The bullies trying to steal your microphone.
That interview, a lot of it has been heavily edited. I'm not so sure how much we can play of it, but the lads are in right form.
Yeah, apparently it's great. I'd say you could play most of it. They're in good
I think
form.
Tommy has it.
Yeah? Are we going to play some of it? Yeah, will we go for it? Yeah, let's do it. I mean, this is... Dublin footballers having celebrations are humans too.
At that stage, like Brian Felton and the lads outside were giving us absolutely no help for the full back line. Jack wasn't doing much. Keane was also getting roasted as well inside.
It was a one-on-one battle inside. It was a one-on-one battle.
There's a lot of space in there.
20 losses individual battle. It's grand.
And then we got the house in order.
We sorted them out. Don't worry about it. We sorted them out. Next year as well. Just because you... by Smalley.
No
curses.
No curses. Off the ball.
I didn't curse. Delete it all.
Let's take two. We try that one again. Who's behind me?
I'm Darren Cleary. Come on, Darren. Johnny, come on.
That's a terrible impression. That's awful. When do you know what it feels like to lose a football match?
I do, Darren. To be honest, I lost this year. Do you? To be honest, I lost this year against Monaghan. I lost against Ballymun, the club championship last year. I lost last year.
Dean Rock enjoyed that one.
I lost last year in the league final. Your losses. Keep going. So I'm well used to it. And we know that any day we don't show up, we could lose against any opposition. When you lost, Dean Rock missed a few frees yesterday. Is that the end of the injury? That's shambolic. Probably your first few frees there yesterday.
It's Brian Fenton counting on one hand the games he's lost and remembering them all like very well.
Every single one of them.
Yeah.
And someone in the background, I think it was Dean Rock, saying process over and over and over again. They were in great form, in fairness to them. They really enjoyed it.
They're like, even you know now that like anytime they're doing those interviews, they're playing bingo in their heads.
Oh, they get great crack out of it.
But that's the thing. It's like I think they're nailed on to go full Kilkenny after they all retire, as in the really interesting stuff that they obviously can't talk about now, even after winning All Ireland, because like they were in the midst of greatness here. They were in the midst of becoming the greatest football team of all time. They just can't reveal that. Like, you don't want to rush their careers on too much, but you're kind of excited to hear about some of the things they're going to say when they retire, because when they get going, they are a really kind of energetic group of people in front of a microphone, and a lot of them are really, really interesting. So that was good pulling back the curtain there, Darren.
I joked to Kilkenny at one stage. I said, this whole thing of being the most boring version of yourself, it's not going to work. You need to be exciting if you want to get on the Sunday game and off the ball. He said, sure, the lads that get on the Sunday game and off the ball are the ones that have won nothing.
Zing.
Yeah, so they're
the audio
they're pretty funny. We don't have the audio of that.
We can
don't have the
sound
audio
drop happily.
I actually did some work down at the ground last night, believe it or not. And I can bring you some sports news involving Bernard Brogan, because he has hinted that he might stick around and play in 2019. The veteran forward suffered a serious knee injury that curtailed his season. He still managed a cameo in the Super 8 section. He came on as a blood sub in the comfortable win over Roscommon, turning 35 next year. But Brogan says he will talk to Jim Gavin and see if he is still needed.
Last year I wasn't sure if I was going to go back, and I sat down with Jim and I said, can I add any value? And I came back early. I didn't go on the holiday. I really motivated myself to get fit, and I was flying early in the year. Probably overdid it, and probably where I kind of fell down with the injury. But obviously the summer wasn't the way I wanted, or it wasn't the way I wanted it to be. As a footballer, you always want to play more. You know, you never want to give up. So, like, if I had played all year, had won another All Ireland, you might have said, "Geez, that might be enough." But there's always that inkling that says, "Are you finished? Have I satisfied my thirst?" I don't think you ever can. But it's down with Jim as I did last year.
Can I take from this that your body's willing, you might be willing? It's just about whether or not Jim still feels there's a role there.
Yeah, obviously Jim would always say that he thinks of a big part to play in the group. But yeah, as I said, is the body willing? You know, I have club championship in 2 weeks. I still have a bit of recovery to do to get the last couple of % that I need and be happy with the knee.
He's coming back.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you? Yeah. 5 in a row. John Millman, meanwhile, pulled off one of the all-time great tennis shocks. He beat Roger Federer to reach the US Open quarterfinals. He was an afterthought ahead of that match. People already expressing excitement for a last-day clash between Federer and Djokovic before he came and clinched an unlikely victory. There's more Dublin reaction from the homecoming on offtheball.com.
Good stuff, Darren. Thanks very much for that. We had an Ireland winner in the Flushing Meadows as well. One of our junior players has won her first match against a Russian. We can stick up the graphic in a second. Tennis Ireland were tweeting out this morning, and we don't have too many winners there. So brilliant news from Flushing Meadows as Georgia Drummy wins her first round match at the US Junior Open with a 7-5, 6-4 victory over her Russian opponent, Tikhonova. Great stuff, Georgia. There you go.
Keep the results ticking over, is all I say.
Yeah.
Hey.
Here's Rory O'Connor talking about Munster. Rugby is back.
And Munster played quite well. Darren Sweetening was excellent, and Neil Cronin was the big bonus. I think he's the guy they've plucked from the AIL to play at scrum half. He's jumped ahead of Williams and Hart. You know, they brought in Albie Mathewson to cover the All Black, to cover Conor Murray, but Neil Cronin, who's Sean's younger brother, looked the part on Saturday, and they had him in the defensive line as well. He led the defensive line. He was really aggressive, so that was a real bonus. And then they were able to roll Joey Carbery off with the game pretty much won, and he went and got the bonus point for them, and he was very impressive as well.
Was he? Yeah, so he had about half an hour, Carbery.
Yeah, very good. And he came on, and they moved JJ Hanrahan to fullback, and they moved up Mike Haley, their new signing, who had a very mixed bag, some good, some bad. They moved him onto the left wing. And I thought Carbery looked really good, and I thought Hanrahan looked like he responded to this guy coming down to take his spot. Even though, and if they can get Hanrahan anywhere near the player that we think he could have been, that we've almost given up on him being, as well as having Joey Carbery there, they have a very potent combination.
Absolutely.
There.
Interestingly, Hanrahan was talking afterwards about enjoying being at 15.
Yeah.
And suddenly you go back to 15, he said you have a lot more time, you can see a lot more, and he really enjoyed it. And he scored a try when he moved back, didn't he?
Yeah, and Carbery was involved in the build-up. Actually, Carbery was playing scrum half at that stage. He just jumped in, someone got sucked in, and his pass was absolutely excellent. And Hanrahan, we all remember what he was when he was under 20s, that couple of years when he was really kind of coming off the bench, won the game in Perpignan that time. A really exciting player. And they will miss Ebo in that playmaking regard, because when, Carbery will obviously take up a lot of the role, but Zebo used to stand in there at times and dictate the play. And if they can get either Haley or Hanrahan doing that, plus the fact that Hanrahan can cover Carbery, I thought Hanrahan looked really sharp, and maybe he got a message from Carbery coming down and he's responded to it. That's what they'll hope for.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the force multiplier effect of somebody coming in and actually making everybody around them better just by virtue of the competition. And then you hope that there's the next impact, which is the passing and vision and lines of running that improves their back play. Because you forget that they have like 4 brilliant centres at Munster, because all 4 of them have had serious injuries over the last 2/3 seasons, to the point where they're coming right together at the same time. Suddenly, from having no depth and a paper-thin squad, they have depth.
Yeah, I think that depth was visible at times last season before the injury struck, and Alan Quinlan, who's often in the studio, like I would totally go along with what he says, that the gap between Munster and Leinster just isn't anywhere as big as people think, particularly after what happened in the summer. Now, I'm very interested to get your take on like what you felt when you saw Joey Carbery at the weekend. But I can tell you, on page 22 in the Irish Times, Jerry Thornley is writing, Carbery's time in red could extend well beyond 2 years. And my favourite line in this, particularly for the Thai man I have in studio with me, is this. When Blackrock and the Leinster Academy can each claim some small slice of Carbery, his family and rugby roots are essentially in Athy, which is not a million miles from Munster. Depending on how he takes to Munster and they to him, and how in the meantime Leinster progress without him, this arrangement could extend well beyond 2 years. So, Ger, I regret to inform you, you're from a place that isn't too far from Munster. You're basically a Munster man, so feel free to jump ship at any time and get on the red jersey.
I mean, this was the law of unintended consequences, where I was talking about the rivalry becoming less fierce. Like, you know, do Munster start recruiting from and offering scholarships to kids who are good in Leinster? Like, that's a fairly natural progression here. Why wait until they're senior players to try and get them? I don't know. I think that it was a chronic misstep from Irish Rugby to have long-term somebody like Joey Carbery leave Leinster, because like he's not going down there and going, I'm only doing my 2 years here and then I'm going back to where I'm from. It's like, screw you, I'm here now. This is my team. I'm going to play with Conor Murray. Like, of course I'm going to give it my absolute best, and actually then I'm going to be a professional about this and play for my new team. And
that's the way it should be.
Yeah, completely.
I think if we accept your point, then Irish Rugby would have looked worse had they come out and said, well, Joey Carbery's only going down there for 2 years. How bad would that have made the rivalry look? That they're using Munster as a training ground for Leinster players. The fact that he's gone there permanently and that this is moving from one rival to another, I would say is far less detrimental to the rivalry. And I do think, we've obviously had this disagreement before, but I don't think the rivalry is dead. I don't think the rivalry's been harmed by this whatsoever. In fact, I can see a little bit of anger there behind your eyes. I think that this has really intensified the rivalry, in your view. Like, you're going to be roaring from the stands in the first derby.
Well, I want Joey Carbery to do really well. I want everybody from Athy to do really well.
Yeah.
Like, so now if he scores the winning try, I'm like, well, that's brilliant that he's doing really well, as opposed to, like, it's not the parochialism of sport is one of the best things about it. The whole fact that it is our county's best against your county's best in GAA is something that actually has some remnant of meaning, even though it's a weird patrician thing that we got handed down to us by the Brits as an administrative way of deciding how we're going to make all our rich people have sections of land, right? That's where our county system essentially comes from. And now it's this very important thing in GAA. Like the provincial things, nobody thinks of being from Leinster or Munster or Connacht or, I mean, maybe some people think they're from 6 counties of Ulster as opposed to the whole thing. Like, it's a made-up sports thing. And you diminish that when you start moving pieces around the board like a chess piece, because then you realise that this is a game that's being played by David Nusafora to, like, make sure that the national team, which pays all the money and makes all the money for Irish Rugby, all of the money comes from our international team, basically. You start realising that this other thing is actually far less important. And the veneer of this being an important rivalry between two clubs gets removed when you start behaving like that, because you're engineering it for a different purpose as opposed to the standalone purpose of the identity of the two provinces. But that's what happens.
Like when you bring.
Well, that's not Manchester United and Manchester City. Like, it isn't. It absolutely isn't.
Because you're not based in the initial position.
Because they're not owned by the same person.
Well, there is that. But, like, do you really think that the most hardcore Munster and Leinster fans are really thinking that way going into the season?
But
so some other people must be of that opinion.
I think that, like, if you're from any of those counties now that have players playing from Leinster who have players playing for Munster, like, you're well within your rights to go, my team is represented by the person from my locality who happens now to be playing for another team for expediency for the national side. Which of these two teams is actually my team? Like, if you're a kid in Athy, are you as likely to have a Munster jersey or a Leinster jersey? I would say you're way more likely now, next year, when, you know, the next round of birthdays and Christmas presents come up, it's like, well, actually, I want a number 10 Munster jersey.
Yeah, okay, so whether or not you agree with that, I think the end point that you can reach from all of that is that it's not going to be a Munster or Leinster jersey. It's definitely going to be an Ireland jersey, because your kid from your locality and their teammates in general are going to probably succeed more than an Ireland rugby team has ever succeeded before. We'll know a lot more in the next 15 months. For sure.
There's two Athy lads in Munster now. So Jeremy Lupin's down there as well. The other aspect of this, so like the Leinster thing was a real thing for a long time. Like Dahi Regan talked to us and very passionately about the fact that like he identified far more with Munster's rugby culture than he did with Leinster's culture. Ultimately his son ends up playing at Leinster, and so I think that again, it kind of just goes to show that the personal impact of having a connection with a team is really important. And when you start engineering the players' relationship with their province, it stops to mean as much, I think.
Like, I completely take your point. I think it's a good point about News of 4 controlling all the pieces here. But like the whole association...
And that's his job. Like, that's his job, and I get it.
But the whole association with your own team, like, that is professional sport. Like, you have to say that is professional sport. And you have to say that the Manchester United-Manchester City rivalry has, to a certain extent, intensified. Not to a certain extent, it has intensified since the money's come into Manchester City.
Because both teams are good now.
Yeah, like, I mean, there was more of a chance of you being a young kid in Manchester, growing up, playing for your favourite team, whether that be City or Manchester United, 20 years ago than there is now. 10 times as much of a chance, given the global network of scouts that both teams have. But the supporters probably feel more of an intense rivalry with the opposite side of Manchester at the moment. So this idea of your young boy looking up to your heroes for whatever Leinster or Munster, like that is comparable to the situation in whatever Manchester United or Manchester City. You're not going to achieve that. You're far less likely to achieve that now. But of course, if you're a fantastic young rugby player, well then where do you go? If we reach the point where Munster are poaching young Leinster kids, then that is a kind of a different direction for sure.
But it's not really different. Like, it's actually exactly the same thing.
It's a further step on from where we are now. And like, are Munster in a position to poach kids that would be destined for the Leinster Academy? Maybe they will be. It's like the success will breed success, but it's certainly going to be happening the other way around. More likely to happen the other way around.
All right, the rugby season has started with us having a Joey Carbery debate. And,
well, I just had to bring up that Athy. You're close to Munster, man.
We've got an interview here next with the Ulster and Irish Rugby captain and Glenisk ambassador Rory Best, who hosted an exclusive rugby training camp for hundreds of Irish kids from 7 to 12 years old 2 weeks ago rather. It was all with thanks to Glenisk. Dave McIntyre caught up with Rory ahead of the new season. Have a look.
Last weekend, over 100 young rugby stars lined out on Saturday in De La Salle in Dublin for a masterclass with the Grand Slam winning captain and, of course, Glenisk ambassador Rory Best. It was as part of an exclusive Glenisk rugby training camp. How did you get on, Rory? Did they teach you a thing or two?
Oh, absolutely. They certainly taught me a thing or two about wit anyway. I think it was brilliant. You know, it was a good day, and I think it's brilliant that Glenisk have given me this opportunity to coach and work with some of what will be the potential young stars that will come through and play for Ireland. And it is a side of the game that I love, you know, trying to affect young people and just seeing kids that play the sport for the sheer enjoyment and the sheer love of it.
You've obviously got a lot less time in your career ahead of you than you have behind you, Rory. So is that something you're already kind of turning your thoughts towards?
I think it's something that I'm very aware that rugby has been very, very good to me over what has been a long period of time. I think when you get the opportunity to give a little bit back, it's an opportunity that I relish. In terms of coaching going forward, I think it's one of a number of things that whenever I do announce the end date, that hopefully some opportunities will come up, and it'll definitely be something that I'll seriously consider doing.
I was watching I know you're still out for a few weeks in terms of getting back this season, playing Pro 14 and Champions Cup rugby, Rory, but watching the Australian tour and how well the Irish front row played, particularly in the second two tests, I was kind of thinking of you going, you're sitting at home and you're watching Rob Herring in particular, obviously a clubmate of yours, play very good rugby, and you know this is it's such an important year, it's a World Cup year. How hard was that, sitting down watching Ireland win a test series in Australia without you leading the team, but also watching guys who, as friendly as you might be with them, they want you out of that World Cup squad heading to Japan, because if you're in it, one of those boys are probably not.
Yeah, look, it's frustrating to have been a big part of the squad for a certain number of years now, and to see them going out and winning, you want to be a part of it. But I think when you look through all of Ireland's big games and big wins over the last, whatever it is, 4 years under Joe, we have been missing one of our so-called spine of leaders throughout it, and you just have to watch, and you want Ireland to keep the momentum of winning going, and they did that. And yeah, look, you'll understand, but it's something that I think you're never comfortable in your position. It's been 14 years now, or this will be my 14th season playing professional rugby, and never once have I been confident that you're going to start. And I think it's that little bit of fear that drives you on to be better, and that's what I've taken into the start of this season. I'm acutely aware how well Rob did, and I get to see him every day, and I see how much he's improved over the last little bit. And look, I know that he's going to be a major threat, not just for my Ulster spot, but my Ireland spot. But at the same time, you want people to push on.
It is such a long season ahead, Rory, isn't it? It is a case, while the World Cup seems like it's miles away, it is going to be part of maybe not quite this calendar year, but this rugby season. And I just wonder, do you feel as sore as you were missing out on that tour of Australia and the historic nature of it? Do you think it actually might be a blessing in disguise when it comes to your chances of lining out for Ireland in Japan as part of that World Cup squad?
Yeah, look, you have to take it for what it is, and while I wanted to be there, I wasn't, so you have to try to find a silver lining somewhere, and the silver lining for me was to get the chance to finish the season rehabbing and training, and probably leaving it in as good as a shape as I finished the season for a long time. A bit of a break, and then back in again to an extended off season because of that hamstring, an extended pre-season because of the hamstring. So yeah, look, it gives me time to freshen up and get mentally as well as physically ready for what will hopefully be a massive 12 months. And look, I think it is about, there's no point looking back and going, I wish I was there. The fact of the matter is I wasn't, so I have to find something to focus in on, and that was freshening up and using it as an opportunity for an extended break to try to come back better than I've ever been.
How is the body overall, Rory? You're 37 by the time the World Cup starts next year. So, do you feel 37? Do you find it more difficult to get yourself ready for games than you would have 10 years ago? Or how has the last decade, in a general sense, been on your body? Like, where are you at the moment?
I think the only bit that sort of feels, the only times you feel 36 is when you look around the changing room, and a lot of the guys that you grew up playing with or have played with for a long period of time are all retired, and you look at the age gap to the next, and that's whenever you feel a little bit older. But in terms of a body, it does take a little bit longer to recover. You've got to be smarter about how long you train and how you recover from those training sessions. And I do less on the farm now than I used to whenever I was 26, and that's just because I need more time to recover. And look, ultimately, professional rugby and playing at the top level is about sacrifices. The sacrifice I have to make now are probably just a little bit more than I did whenever I was playing 10 years ago. But that's just a par for the course, and I think because that the light at the end of the tunnel is closer now than it was 10 years ago, you kind of know that it is a limited time, and you've got to do whatever it takes to get you in the right place to compete for these positions. And like you said at the start, at the top of the show, there are now some serious options right throughout the Ireland squad, and hooker is no different.
Yeah, and we needed to get that time locked down, Rory. There was a lot of talk of your contract over the course of last season, and it was great when we learned that you had penned a 17-month deal that was taking you through to the end of the World Cup. Do you see this as being your final season?
Look, I think at the minute I'll concentrate on getting back playing, and hopefully after the November internationals, if things can go as I plan it, I can get a few Pro 14, a few Europe, a few internationals, and then I'll sit down with my wife probably after that and take a bit of stock. I'll have tasted a bit of everything: European rugby, club rugby, and international rugby, and I'll see, do I think I can go on after the World Cup, or do I think that this will be my last season with Ulster and hopefully finish at the World Cup? And I think that'll be something. I'm not ready to make that decision now, because I think when you make these decisions in the middle of pre-season, whenever you're generally more tired anyway, you could potentially make the wrong one. But
yeah,
I think it's something that I'll take very seriously, because it's a balancing act. I don't want to retire and think I could have played on, and also I don't want to be playing thinking that I'm not going to get my place and I'm just going to drift out of the game.
Yeah, it's a balancing act you have to come up with, isn't it? One final question, Rory. If it is your last season with Ulster, you really want to win something with them. Just talk to me briefly about how important it is that Dan McFarland is in place, ready to rock now, as opposed to that really unsavoury situation that may well have ensued and him not arriving till January when maybe Ulster, for example, could already been out of Europe. How key is that?
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that when you're in this environment, all you're worried about is training for rugby and playing rugby, and you leave all the rest, and it's amazing how you get on with things. And I think our squad, to give them their credit, have just got on with the pre-season. They haven't let it. The boys that have stepped in with Peely and JP and Aaron Dundon and Daniel Soper have done really well, but I think ultimately nobody wanted to say it, but it's brilliant to have Dan there and to have him there a week before we actually prepare for the first league game is really good. And he's come in and he's had an impact and he's been around the place. And look, it is important. You need as much stability as you get, and now we're getting that. And I think in terms of me, and if it was the last season, look, I would absolutely love to win something if it is my last season with Ulster. But ultimately, probably bigger than that, it's a legacy you leave. And if we can get to a situation where a lot of the hard work we did at the tail end of last season through into this season, if that creates something special within Ulster that can last for the next, who knows, 5, 10, 15 years, then that's bigger than winning something this season. And that's something that you can look back on at the end of your career and go, you know what, I was part of the start of that. Look, obviously you want to win something and lift the trophy at the end of it, but not every team can do that. But what you can do is create something that is lasting.
Rory, it's been brilliant talking to you. Such a long road ahead. I hope you enjoyed and that you're fit for it, and best of luck with the comeback.
Thanks very much.
You can watch that full interview back on youtube.com/offtheball, and make sure you get along there and subscribe. People keep asking us if it's possible just to listen to this show as a radio show, and it is. If you go onto offtheball.com on your phone, there's a player that automatically pops up between 7:45 and 9:30 every morning, and you just hit play on that, and lo and behold, you don't even have to look at our ugly mugs. You can just listen to the sweet dulcet tones of our mid-Atlantic twangs.
It really? Is that what they are?
youtube.com/offtheball, and just a reminder that Ulster and Ireland Rugby captain Rory Best is a Glenisk ambassador. So the other big story that's been happening, can you see this here? It's do you know what that is? Do you know what that is? You know what that is. That's Colin Kaepernick. That was our official bit of NFL merchandise, and so this is not. There is no Nike logo on it because it was. It's the little character, but Colin Kaepernick overnight was announced as one of the main characters in the Just Do It 30th anniversary commercials coming out from Nike to give it its proper name. Nike had been paying Colin Kaepernick all along, waiting for the right moment. That moment is now as he becomes the face of the company's 30th anniversary of the Just Do It campaign. That was Darren Ravel's tweet yesterday, which was breaking the story, and it nearly broke the internet as well. That and the guy cutting the Nike logos off his socks, and the various people going, whoa, I'm never going to sign, I'm never going to buy any more Nike, hashtag Make America Great Again. But it turns out this is like the end. Kaepernick was on a 5-year deal with Nike anyway up to this point, and obviously stuff had happened that no longer meant that Nike was getting Kaepernick on the field of play doing the things that Colin Kaepernick could do. People forget that he was one of the most explosive quarterbacks that we'd ever seen as a dual threat. That means that he can run the ball and throw the ball. There was a playoff game against Aaron Rodgers' Green Bay, when they were still in their Super Bowl window at the time, where he ran for over 230 yards, I think, which is unheard of from quarterback. He just took off and went, and there was two 80-yard runs in the first kind of 15 minutes of the game, where everybody's like, what the hell is this? They'd waited until the playoffs to unleash him, and then single-handedly the game was over at that point. And he obviously gets within a throw of winning the Super Bowl and one of the greatest comebacks, and the lights go out in New Orleans, and then the next year gets within a throw of beating the Seattle Seahawks. Richard Sherman ends up tipping the ball away. That's you come at me with a sorry receiver like Crabtree. Where he's shouting at the reporters, and he becomes famous in the aftermath of that. So that was the absolute peak level of Kaepernick. The Seahawks go on and completely kill the Broncos in the Super Bowl. So like clearly that was he was within a throw basically of winning a Super Bowl 2 seasons in a row. But his career falls apart after that because of injuries, and the San Francisco 49ers completely implode. And at that point, Kaepernick decides that he is going to take a stand and will initially sit during the national anthem. He has a conversation with a military veteran who says, I think sitting during the national anthem might be a little bit disrespectful. How about if you knelt down during the national anthem? You know, it's like people are kneeling in service. It's like you kneel in prayer. That might be something a bit more respectful. And obviously what he wanted to protest was police brutality against people of colour, and the injustice that people of colour in America suffer on a daily basis, and he wanted to highlight that. And obviously it went completely massive. It ends up being something that Trump tweets about. It ends up being something that the entire NFL is now coming out to try and ban and try and inflict a policy on people who won't be allowed to kneel during the national anthem, that you have to stand, or if you don't, your team will be fined and you'll be fined, or you can stay, you can do what you want in the change rooms, but if you come out you have to do it. So in the meantime, this Nike deal was still there, because it was a 5-year deal. All the while he's not on the field, and it turns out Nike have been paying him, and now they've decided that they're going to make him the face, or one of the faces, of their Just Do It campaign. So the tagline for his one is "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything." A bit of a backlash to this, funnily enough, not just from the Make America Great morons,
because you've naturally got to be cynical about all big commercial deals, and maybe we don't have to be cynical this time. Maybe there is all just honest effort from all parties.
I think you're right to be cynical, and everybody has to make their own mind up.
Well, I'm not sure if my cynicism is well placed. You think about perhaps that this is just the next destination in a journey of commercialism in sport, that you think about Republicans buy sneakers too, and maybe we've been tarring brands like Nike with that slogan for too long now. Maybe the bottom line isn't the thing that counts all the time. But then you think about it, and ultimately, if they're trying to put aside what the profit is from, say, losing all the Make America Great, again, morons, as you say, over the next few months and years, well, is the legacy of this not going to get them more money in the end? Is it not going to give them, a little bit more exposure? The brand of Colin Kaepernick has strengthened so much since he got blackballed by the NFL. It has, particularly globally. Particularly around the world. As you say there, 2013, 2014, he's a superstar.
Oh, yeah, okay, but it's just to, you just explain what that means, though. The brand of Colin Kaepernick has got stronger. Why?
Because of the taking a knee stance. Because that...
because of what he stands for.
Well, it is, yeah, but it is also to do with the mainstream coverage that Donald Trump has given Colin Kaepernick in a roundabout way. It is ironic, really, that it was last year when this really kind of exploded fully. Obviously it happened before then, but it was last year when Donald Trump makes that speech in Alabama or wherever it is, saying, what did he call? Did he call them SOBs? You did. He called them SOBs, the people who kneeled for the anthem. And of course, Kaepernick was the leader in all of this. And that hardens the people who supported Colin Kaepernick. It drove people further away who may have been on Donald Trump's side. But the main point here is that everybody was talking about this leader of men that Colin Kaepernick had become, that this global movement, which it had become because Trump's words were putting this into the television screens and the computer screens in pretty much every house in the world, because this was international news on a day-by-day basis. The Colin Kaepernick got so bloody famous outside of sport and outside of American sports in particular, that Nike have got a gem. They've got an absolute gem here. But maybe they're sitting down and they're doing this for the right reasons. There was a great Nike ad last year, the year before, with Kevin Durant and Serena Williams, and it was about, it was very timely. It didn't make any specific mention of police, but it was very timely given everything that happened about 2 summers ago, that Nike would release this ad supporting people of colour, and I can't remember what the actual slogan was. So Nike do have form in this, and ultimately when it comes to companies that are set up to make huge profits, I think you just get cynical naturally, and ultimately they are thinking about what the bottom line is here. Maybe they just have good ideals at heart, though.
Yeah. I don't know, but I think they've got profit at heart, obviously, and that's what this is going to help with that. But anyway, I'm a big Colin Kaepernick fan. I think I think anything that helps get his message out there ultimately is going to be a force for positive in the world. Let's move on, and I'm delighted to say that we can make contact with Graham Hunter in sunnier climes than we are. Graham, good morning to you.
Bonjour mes amis, welcome aboard.
You're literally floating.
Yeah, listen, mentally you've known that for years. You're right. I brought you on board the Crusader on the Canal du Midi between Bordeaux and Toulouse, and you're very welcome.
Hey, well, look, we know you've got to get going pretty soon, so this is going to be a regular slot on OTBAM. We're delighted to have you with us. So, a couple of things that we wanted to talk to you about. It's a bit of an aberration, but apparently Fulham outspent Barcelona in the transfer window this year. It's not really any kind of comment beyond Fulham spent a lot of money and maybe Barcelona didn't get all of their transfer targets.
No, I think you can definitely put flesh on the bones there, Ger. For example, you and I, we've all on your show, we've spoken often enough about once you lose a central nervous system, which has been the Cruyff ideal about who to buy, how to buy, what concepts to apply to the planning, the thinking, the selling. Now, that Cruyff concept went right down through Chiqui Begiristain and Rijkaard and Pep Guardiola and Zubizarreta to an extent. Once you lose that, and they lost that some years ago, the signings become more haphazard. There's been a jumble sale idea about Barcelona's signings. You're rummaging around, you see something shiny, you grab it. Where's your plan? And therefore, this summer, what they've done pretty well is cleared out. They've got a lot of footballers out who weren't fitting, who aren't giving the value that their original outlay had asked for. And what they've done that I think is at least interesting is that they've gone back to the kind of concepts which should mean that this summer's money has been spent better. And going to your Fulham point, they've done it at a net profit. Now, I see people all the time say, never mind net. It's all about quality. It's all about efficacy. That's very good. That's good. But if you're a club like Barcelona, which is trying to spend 600 and something million on renewing the stadium, and you're running out of money, that's pretty damn embarrassing. So without listing every signing, but having taken your lead, Artur, for example, the young Brazilian, has come in lacking experience at the top level, but looking as if he's played all his life in the Barca scheme. That's clever. That's good buying. Vidal, who's come from Bayern Munich, is going to be fun. A warrior, an occasional misbehaviour, somebody who's avowed his distaste for Real Madrid while a Bayern Munich player and since signing for Barcelona. He doesn't look right. The sort of dyed-in-the-wool culés who want to see pure football are like, oh no, never, not another Paulinho. Well, Paulinho, who helped them win the double, and the coach Valverde came out instantly say, yeah, that's the kind of footballer I want in my squad, because he's talking about plugging certain gaps that are absent, and he's talking about never having teams steamroller them without resistance like Paris Saint-Germain did, like Juventus did, like Roma did. So you're not looking for an exposition of the entire summer's business by Football Club Barcelona, but they've done some business that looks more shrewd than recently. They've got rid of guys who weren't working. And two small points I like. Munir El Haddadi, who is a talent, it came through their academy and was loaned out. He had a fabulous season at Alaves last season. He's back, and that's a good decision. Secondly, beyond what you spend, they've developed Dembele. Dembele gradually is showing intelligence and football articulacy and little clues. Suarez and Messi are beginning to look for him. He's beginning to understand their movement, and he's beginning to track back. It's not a spend this summer, but it does increasingly look like it might be business well done.
Okay, a quick word about Real Madrid. It's an entire new era at Real Madrid. Obviously, no Zidane, no Ronaldo. How have things begun in the new era, and who is stepping into the leadership vacuum on and off the field?
Jerry, I find it really exciting. Number one, what I can tell you from first hand, having been in Krasnodar when Lopetegui was sacked and knowing that the players weren't particularly happy, there is a real bond that you can see from the daily work, not from what happened in the past between, say, Nacho and Lopetegui, or Isco and Lopetegui, or even Asensio and Lopetegui. Right across the squad, there are players who know him or have worked with him, and either at club or international level, because remember, Casemiro found his feet at Lopetegui's Porto. They're enjoying the daily training, and you're beginning to see it. The suppositions where all of us have seen a superstar leave whether it be a club or a franchise, because off the ball you talk about so many different brands of sport. When a superstar goes, sometimes it can be a collapse. Sometimes players don't believe. And at other times, guys who've been in the shadows, guys who've been best supporting actor, step forward looking for the Oscar. Now that's happening without question to Isco, to Asensio, to Benzema and to Bale. And therefore, when you get them playing at the back with the usual kind of enthusiasm, if not necessarily always finesse, and when you get the midfielders, particularly I want to go to Kroos, because we've seen very little of Modric, but Kroos has come back very much like Marc-Andre ter Stegen at Barcelona, buzzing with the anger and disappointment of an embarrassing summer. Kroos over the last few weeks, both I'm told in training, but then in match situations, has been Rolls Royce at his very, very best. And the headline makers, the ones that you guys have been talking about already, clearly are Benzema, no longer in Tour de France ideals, a domestique to team leader Ronaldo. He's gone back to what made him 33 million euro purchase, what is it now, 8 seasons ago, when coming from Lyon as a centre forward. And he's back to playing as a 9. He's got 5 goals in 4 games. But rather than the stats, guys, what you look at is his movement, his confidence, the number of times he shoots on goal, and the number of times that he's putting the ball on goal or near the goal compared to sometimes when he was working for Ronaldo. And he's such a bright footballer. He may not be the brightest man, but as a footballer, he's got University Challenge stamped all over him. And I watched somebody enjoying his work again, guys. I think that's a crucial aspect. He's got a thorn in his side because he was excluded from France as they went and won the World Cup. And maybe the bigger headline, maybe the guy you've talked about most, Bale is now free to roam down the right, down the left. He's terrorising fullbacks. When he's playing down the right, he can cut in and shoot on his left foot as he did in the Ronaldo era. But when he's playing on the left, the crossing is fantastic. He's producing assists. He's playing down the middle, shooting from distance. He's terrifying if you're a defender who's not 6'4" and big and strong. And therefore, Bale is not just assuming control or filling the vacuum, because quite soon we have to stop talking about Ronaldo's not there. Yeah. They had to do so weeks ago, otherwise it's unhealthy. But we have to too analyse the team, the players in their own right. And what I'm saying to you is that Bale's enjoying himself again, and for that reason he's a much more dangerous footballer.
One last question which I'm going to ask about the real Ronaldo in a minute, but did you know that it's been reported in the last 24 hours, Owen, that 1 million followers disappeared from Real Madrid's social accounts in 24 hours after Ronaldo's departure? Somebody was tracking this before and after, and 1 million of them just went, no, we're not. We were Ronaldo fans, not Real Madrid fans.
That's a sad indictment of football, isn't it? To actually go to the effort of unliking the page. Do you not want to see how your ex is getting on? No, do you not want to see how your former friend in Real Madrid is keeping? No, do those 1 million people not have any curiosity about the future of Real Madrid? A
bit creepy, Owen. Speaking of Ronaldo, the real Ronaldo has apparently bought a share of Real Valladolid.
No, he has. You're right. I was there on their opening day of the season and traipsing around an astonishing stadium. For those who don't know about Valladolid and what Brazilian Ronaldo is buying into, they are one of the grand names of Spanish football. If you go there in the winter, you really are, you need to be dressed like Scott of the Antarctic. It's frighteningly cold. That stadium gets full and hostile. It's a big old place. There were days when Valladolid had a perfectly adequate and interesting football proposition, and some of the greats have been born there and come through that city. So there's pride. It's not a franchise, but it's a name that used to make big clubs tremble. Right now, well, you saw the hilarious spectacle of their newly laid pitch, and I asked around the town, but why, with 70 days since your promotion from the Segunda, has nothing been done? And they just went old style Spain. They went, well, it's hard to get contractors to do the things, and at least it's been done before the first game. And the attitude was very 1960s Spain. We did our best, but it hasn't happened. And the carpet strips were lifting as Barcelona were there. But also I went around and, the toilets were dilapidated. There was no toilet paper anywhere. The coffee machines were broken. Lovely club. Nice people. Not looking equipped for life in the Primera Division at all. And therefore, the real Ronaldo, as you call him, he came in with innate talent to the game. And then lived his life exactly the way that he pleased, and therefore the jokes around Valladolid are that if they get through in the cup, if they win a game, there'll be week-long parties. If you remember when Ronaldo had his birthday party at Real Madrid, there used to be double-decker buses full of young Brazilian and Spanish maidens moving into his house. So therefore, I suppose Valladolid, there's an extra incentive to win games if Ronaldo is part of your board, because he knows how to celebrate a win. What he's bringing football-wise, what he's going to take to them in terms of decision-making. I go back to both your point about profiles and the other Ronaldo leaving the club. There was a stage at which José Angel Sanchez, the vice president of Real Madrid, said, listen, we're not quite buying fans, but we know that fans come and follow your brand because of, I heard you talking about Colin Kaepernick's brand, and Real Madrid deliberately brought into the idea that you buy followers by buying big club names, and therefore Cristiano Ronaldo taking some people away from their social media accounts and their brand shimmer won't be a great surprise to them, and it's what Valladolid are doing, in my opinion. When you look at Ronaldo and how he likes to live his life, what he thinks like, how he speaks like right now, this is a way for him to be back feeling football, smelling the grass occasionally as he watches training. What football experience and intelligence he's bringing to the club, I'm not so sure. But like I say, if they knock out a big team from the cup or win a couple of games in the league, the party should be fun.
Yeah, and he's bringing attention too. Last point, Cristiano Ronaldo, Mohamed Salah and Luka Modric are the shortlist for World Player of the Year. I think it's the first time since 2006 there's no Leo Messi. Messi can't really complain about not being on the list, but maybe Griezmann or Mbappe might have a case.
Jar. It's just as well I'm not in the studio with a custard pie in my hand. Because you'd be all Max Sennett right now. Don't be ridiculous. If people want to vote for players other than Leo Messi, great, go on. If there is an award called the best and Leo Messi's not even on the podium, it's a joke. If you want to argue that other players had bigger headline achievements last season, then I'm not actually going to get into a punch-up with you or anybody else. Leo Messi last season, particularly across getting Argentina to the World Cup and then Barcelona's League and Cup double. And I'm aware that the shimmer for domestic achievements in certain countries has diminished. The shimmer wouldn't diminish for a Liverpool player who won the Premier League after so many years of aching to win it, I know. But the fact that Barcelona regularly win the league doesn't take away from anybody who watched Leo Messi closely and how he played last season. If there's a top three in an award called the best, and he's not in that three, then the award is broken.
He did score the most goals, and we've got the Squawka stats up there. 34 goals, the joint most assists, and the most chances created in La Liga last year. I guess it's a World Cup year. The team that wins the World Cup, you generally see, and it hasn't happened even. There's no French.
Yeah, we know the formula. We know how people think and act and decide these days, and I can't change that. I'm only saying, I pay attention. I work hard. I go around Europe, not just Spain. If you appreciate, your stats are good to back up that you generously gave me something to back up my argument. But if you look at the quality of his play, the intelligence of his play, the decision making, the way in which he often carries the team on his shoulders, we're talking about somebody who, if you want to say the best over the last 3 months of the season, if you want to say the best, in the Barca-Roma game, fine. If you want to talk about the best over a 10, 12-month period, he has to be on that podium, and then people can decide for themselves how they do it. For my money, in my understanding of footballer, he remains the best footballer on the planet, not just in this award, because you have to have an all-embracing idea about what the best means. If the competition is set up to go, well done, you won something, well done, you had a blitzkrieg last couple of months of the season, I don't really mind, but it isn't my idea of the best.
Fair enough. Graham, we'll let you get back to your holidays. Thanks a million.
Merci. Bonjour.
Au revoir. À tout à l'heure.
Yeah. So do you still stand by your Messi point after seeing those statistics? And Graham offering to fight you?
Well, the fight would put me off, but look, I think that's how it works, right?
What's how it works?
That, like, you get a certain period where everybody goes, you're doing these amazing things, and then after that, you can continue to do those things, and it's like, well, what have you done for me lately? I need to see something new from you.
And you mean Argentina getting knocked out of the World Cup at the last 16 stage?
I think as well it's that like we've become accustomed to Leo Messi scoring 30 goals a season, and when he scores 35 goals a season, instead of going, these are ridiculous figures.
Yeah.
It's like he's only scoring 35 goals, and most of them were like, you know, the normal Leo Messi goals as opposed to the one where he dribbles from inside his own half, and that hasn't done the rounds, and there is no gif of that.
Yeah, no, it's true. That's.
I'm not saying it's the right thing, but you can see how these decisions get made.
We become conditioned to Lionel Messi being absolutely amazing at football. And he was absolutely amazing in the first 6 months of this year.
Why did France win the World Cup? Like, who was the best player in that? Who was the most explosive player in that French team?
Well, it's Kylian Mbappe.
I think so, and I think that the World Cup has to trump an overhead bicycle kick in the Champions League from Ronaldo.
Yeah, but then winning the league in France and not doing extremely well in the Champions League, despite the fact that you play alongside Edinson Cavani and Neymar, should probably kind of give some weight to the idea that you shouldn't be included in that list, despite the fact that you had a really good World Cup. Or do we just judge it?
Like the World Cup, it's the most important thing that's ever going to happen in a 4-year period.
Champions League is pretty important.
Not as important as a World Cup.
Domestic title is pretty important.
Not as important as a World Cup, though. You can't say the Champions League is on a par with the World Cup. You can't.
No, I'm not saying. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that the accumulation of what Mbappe didn't do in the rest of the year is probably a fair reason why he wasn't included. I think he should have been, but he wasn't. I would say Lionel Messi deserves to be there more than Kylian Mbappe, though, for a sustained period of excellence within the parameters of the best when this is being judged. But it does seem that there is no criteria for any of this.
It's true. I'd like to see what the recommendations are for the criteria are for the judges. Right, so let's bring in this interview with Michael Calvin. He's a football writer. You might see him on BT Sport. He's made some really brilliant documentaries on BT Sport as well over the last couple of years, really. And he's got a new book. It's called State of Play, Getting Under the Skin of the Modern Game. Here's how their conversation went.
Okay, so State of Play, Under the Skin of the Modern Game is the brand new book from author Michael Calvin. Michael's been on the show with us before, speaking about the likes of Living on the Volcano and No Hunger in Paradise, just two of the titles you'll know Michael from. And he joins us again this morning. Michael, good morning to you.
Morning, Eoin. How are you?
Not too bad. First of all, congratulations on the book. It's a brilliant read. And I guess, is it fair to say that the best summation of the book is a collection of human stories that tell the wider stories of a number of very, very important issues?
I suppose so, yeah. I suppose it's everything you wanted to know about modern football, but were afraid to ask in many ways. I've purposely shone a light into some pretty deep crevasses, but hopefully I've exposed the workings of some very good people in very trying circumstances. And you're right, what I've tried to do here is humanise the issues which confront modern football and articulate them through the eyes and the experiences of those people who are dealing with those issues. So it's very, very broad, looking at all the major issues from concussion, mental health, the intolerance of modern society, which is then reflected in modern football, racism, homophobia, and just the big picture about, where is this game going?
We may as well start with one of those important issues that you mentioned there, which is concussion. And it is quite striking that it is the very first chapter in the book. You get straight into it. There's no messing about here. It's called Martyr, the first chapter. And in it, you speak to Dawn Astle, who is the daughter of Jeff, who died by CTE. And there's some amazing detail in this because Dawn herself has a police background, I think, and she talks about historical evidence of CTE in football. A 1958 article you mentioned about punch-drunk footballers, and then the death of Charlie Roberts in 1939 after a brain operation. And I think the common misconception is that we're only starting to discover now the dangers of heading the ball in football, which is true, but that doesn't mean that heading the ball has only been a problem in football in the modern era.
Yeah, there is real historical context. I think it was a sort of a double-edged occasion for me with Dawn. On a purely human level, it was one of those interviews, I don't know if you've ever done them, Eoin, where the emotional bond is so strong and the subject matter is so tragic that you and the interviewee end up in tears, which is what happened there. And it was a very powerful and profoundly moving experience to literally sit in Jeff Astl's seat in his lounge at home, to be literally focusing on him having scored the winning goal at Wembley, a huge photograph of that moment on the wall, and the place is suffused with his spirit. You have his daughter then sharing the last 30 seconds in his life. He choked to death on his own vomit in his front garden on a family occasion. Died at 59. The coroner said that he was a victim of an industrial injury, i.e. hitting a football. His descent was very sudden and very disturbing. And there were elements of Hillsborough in the campaign that Dawn had to wage for the authorities to take her seriously. It took 14 years for really meaningful research to be launched. I think the most telling thing about it was it's almost like the mundanity of it. She has an exercise book, just the sort of thing that our kids would have, plastic backed, and in there's about 400 different names, annotated by her, little thumbnail sketches of their lives. Now, those are all former footballers who either died or are in the terminal stages of dementia. And that is the reality, that is the humanity of the issue. And I found that very, very, a moving experience, and something that hopefully, if people read the book, it will give momentum to her campaign. Because I know I suppose one of the great things about doing a book is the immediate interaction you get with the reader. And the book was published last week. And on that first day of publication, I had 3 former footballers, all in their early 40s, contact me, basically saying, look, we've been concussed through our careers. We haven't been checked out. We're going to do so. So it's a very, very, I think, important social issue. And I think it's one which will ambush football going forward. I think we might well have some form of class action suit going forward in the way that the NFL did. And the real tragedy of this, Eoin, is those footballers died without knowing they were footballers, without knowing the pure pleasure that they gave to strangers. And I think, again, that gives the humanity to the issue that I'm trying to seek throughout the book.
Yeah, the Jeff Astle, the way you write it, it's very heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking read, and there's a very, very important line, I think, from Dawn in that first chapter, where she says, with a lot of these issues, where there's a will, there's a way, and sometimes it can get found, and a solution can get found. But she says that there is a way here, but the authorities may not have the will.
Yes, and you have to support her criticism when you look at how difficult it's been for her to get a message across, but also the arrogance and ignorance of the authorities when initially confronted by the problem. They've essentially dismissed her. They promised things, they prevaricated, they didn't deliver, and also they just looked down at her. She had 2 letters initially, in the wake of her father's death. She had 2 letters from the Football Association. The first was from their lawyers warning about the complications which would arise if legal action was taken. And the second was an offer, an insulting offer, of 2 tickets for an England friendly. One designated for her mother, and the other one to be shared between the 3 sisters. And to see the disgust in her face, and to hear the hurt in her voice, that told me a lot about, again, the flesh and blood that is in football. It is a people business, and it treats people appallingly.
What do you think justice would be for the families, and not just Dawn Astle and her family, but the justice for the other 400 people and their families that they've left behind? How would justice in what form would it be in for them to feel satisfied?
I think just tangible progress. I don't think we're dealing with ambulance chasers here. What we're dealing with is people who've seen their nearest and dearest, their beloved, the local heroes of whom they were really proud, taken away from them. And there's a search for answers. Why has this occurred? Let's make sure that other families don't suffer the same trauma. Now, that can only be done as a long-term process by the development of a brain bank. I know quite a few footballers are talking about donating their brains when they pass. That is the sort of thing that needs to happen. There is more research going on globally, certainly in the States and in the UK, because at the moment CTE cannot be distinguished in living tissue. We have to wait until death. So research needs to be accelerated in that area. There are some very good people working on it. Dr. Willie Stewart, who actually did the post-mortem of Jeff Astor's brain, he discovered there that he, in his estimation, Jeff Astor's brain was that of a 90-year-old man, and he was 59. And I think also it's so poignant that someone like Jeff Astor's involved in this, because it's a bit of a throwback to a former time. Local hero, lived in a club semi-detached house, had an old goalpost holding up his washing line in the back garden. Yet when he died, the full force of the community's grief became apparent. There were people lining the route of the cortege. They were on the walls as he was borne into the church, trying just to touch his coffin. And so that again is something that is a reminder of the really deep emotional bonds that can be formed between a footballer and his or her public.
Yeah, like you mentioned the fact that you can't actually detect CTE in living brain tissue, which is obviously a scientific barrier. But the one thing we do have is a player talking about how they feel after they hit a ball, or if they feel pain, to speak about that pain. And you use the term misplaced machismo in the book, which I think is a great phrase in terms of describing the attitudes that there are in the dressing room. And this goes into a wider topic you explore quite well in the book in terms of the dressing room culture, the manliness, the bravado that exists, which is ultimately allowing footballers to try and cover up what they're feeling in a purely physical sense after they head the ball, and repeatedly, time and time and time again.
Yes, as you say, it's not just about the physical sensation of heading the ball. It's the culture around the admittance of perceived weakness. If you look at the dressing room culture is very harsh. It's very macho, and vulnerability is perceived to be weakness, and sensitivity is perceived to be weakness. And people cannot, or they're almost informed subliminally that they cannot afford to show that weakness, because it is a Darwinian environment, the modern dressing room. And then that leads to the point which I think in the book we look at someone like Drew Broughton, who is a journeyman former footballer, 22 clubs, who's now working with young players. And to quote him, he sits across the desk from young players in tears on a regular basis. And we look at the modern footballer with a degree of awe, and he's covered in this sort of celebrity stardust. But let's try and strip that away. And what you see, and there's a very good example that Drew gives, no names, no pactoral, because of obviously professional clinical confidentialities, but he works with an England under-21 international. If you look at him and you judge him by his social media profile, he's living the dream. He's got the bling, he's got the street smarts, but actually, and he's got the money, but actually, this is a boy, and he is still a boy in a man's world, who cries himself to sleep each night. He watches constant YouTube videos of Ronaldinho on the loop to see if he can get better. Yeah, he's got a manager who basically asks him, well, what's your problem? You've got the money, you've got the contract, you've got the talent. Why are you worried? Why are you stressing? And that old school approach then leads on to one of the other issues in the book, which is this whole idea of modern management. That to me is probably exemplified by Gareth Southgate in terms of being empathetic and emotionally intelligent. And in the World Cup, in the build up to the World Cup, he had the courage to say to his players, "Be yourselves." And we had them. So, for instance, someone like Danny Rose coming out, talking eloquently, passionately about things that he's experienced: racism, gun crime. Now, I've been around the England team a long time, too long to be perfectly honest, and it's usually a day pass to Camp Paranoia. But I tell you one thing, that would not have happened in the past, and I think that's really important. And if we have to look at the other side of the ledger, I'll give you one name: José Mourinho.
In terms of instilling this sort of old school sense of bravado in the dressing room, the sense of bravado that can sometimes lead in evidence in chapter 2 in your book of an England under-21 player crying themselves to sleep because the manager, for example, looks at his social media profile, looks at his flashy car and says, "Well, everything's fine in your life. I can say whatever I like to you."
Yeah, that's true. That player doesn't play for José Mourinho, but I was using Mourinho to make the point that here is someone who exemplifies the old school: command and control, do as I say, and the imposition of authority from above without sensitivity. So we have the example very recently with Anthony Martial, where he is fined because he makes the entirely human, rational decision to stay with his partner following childbirth. Now, what message does that send out to his teammates in that dressing room? That when you've got, and a lot of them are fathers, when you've got that lack of sensitivity, it has to have an effect in terms of the respect that you have for the person who's your boss, essentially. And I think also, if you look at where we're going globally in management terms, I tend to think that you look at North America and you see some trends which might come over this side of the Atlantic in the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So if you look at AJ Hinch, who's the manager of the reigning World Series baseball champions, the Houston Astros, here's a guy who's got a degree in psychology from Stanford.
Yeah.
You have players in the NFL who are measuring their brain waves. So the human condition is becoming an essential part of modern sport and inevitably modern football.
Michael Calvin there, you're saying that's Kirk Cousins who's doing that. It's there's also the 38-year-old, not the backup QB who just got beaten out by Sam Darnold. What's his name? At the Jets. Not Fitzpatrick. Is it? Fitzmagic?
No, it's not Fitzpatrick. I know the guy you're talking about. He's got, the name escapes me, but yeah, Kirk Cousins is the quarterback.
Not Ryan Fitzpatrick, yeah. So, Jets backup QB. Here we go. Josh McCown. Josh McCown's there as well. So they wear these kind of helmet things that...
Yeah, talk about marginal gains. It's you do wonder, will that become a feature of professional football? Have we, on this side of the Atlantic, we've taken all our leads from the NFL, really?
There's a thing in the paper today about Troy Deeney. His new fitness regime is apparently making him a better footballer, and he's on the verge of an England call-up because of his new fitness regime, and there's pictures of him doing weights, and I'm like, you're a professional footballer, why have you not been looking after yourself? It's just madness.
Are you sure you didn't pick up a copy of the newspaper from 2009?
Well, the point was that apparently there are some NFL players who put $1 million into their body in the off season. I would like to, I'd like to be there to take it out of their bodies if I could. I'm happy to be the shaman who's like, ooh, we're going to do some water over your stomach today. Oh, you look so fit today. So I'm sure a lot of it is complete bollocks, but and obviously a lot of it is human growth hormone, and so maybe it's very expensive these days, I don't know. But there's definitely a sense that the NFL players treat themselves as businesses, as individuals, as opposed to part of this kind of team dynamic, and so therefore they trust the team's strength and conditioning. They're getting whatever advantage they can through the science, legally, and through the illegal drugs that many of them are taking as well. So That's where the marginal gains conversation takes us.
Yeah, as in like not the ego, but certainly the brand of each individual will help to a better collective ultimately.
Yeah.
Like the TB12 method has probably improved the Patriots.
Cristiano Ronaldo's personal vanity has turned him into one of the greatest footballers in the history of the planet.
It's futuristic levels of vanity, really. It's Cristiano Ronaldo is going to be seen as a pioneer. Years to come.
Absolutely. OTBAM this morning is live with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with the choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Juan José has been in touch to say many kids follow players now, Ger, rather than teams. Disgusting, I know. Real Madrid lost 1 million social media followers after Ronaldo left. Yeah, that was the point we were making. Thomas Boyle says Comer of Galway, true marquee forward.
Yeah. But so is Shane Walsh. To a certain extent, Ian
And you have
Burke
two
is.
marquees. You can't. They'd be like competing marquees.
Well, the idea of what a marquee
Because
forward
it's kind of
has
like
changed.
a dome.
It just seems that you hate the word marquee.
Tommy's saying Comer and Paul Ganey are marquee forwards.
Yeah, but
Comer isn't a marquee forward, he's saying. No. He can play anywhere, he's saying.
Your conversations through the glass with Tommy are my favourite part of the show.
One-sided. It's kind of like Tommy doesn't actually exist, he's just a voice in my head. Conora O'Gallagly in Irish? Conor Gogley. Gallagher. Opinions on potential Declan Rice replacements if he does declare for England, or potential new goal scorers for Ireland with Long's poor form and Maguire's injury. We got nothing. We got no opinions on that. I'm sorry. I'm closing that conversation down. How do we replace Declan Rice, who we never had, who we'd penciled in for a good 10 years as like our most important central midfielder / central defender?
Yeah, how do we do that? We need a marquee forward. Would Damien Comer consider switching codes? Bit of a target man up there. No, but we certainly wouldn't be able to get a marquee forward of Tyrone, that's for sure. But maybe if somebody might be able to switch codes, it might work out better.
Paul Mannion,
exactly. His salt will be tested for sure if he transfers over to soccer. I don't know. Like we're going to have to start programming robots or something here to try and get the generational talents up and running, because it seems that we were going backwards. I mean, we know we've been going backwards for a while now, but it seems that slope has suddenly steepened quite a bit, and we're hurtling down it at the moment.
Why isn't Roy Keane forced to explain what happened, asks Lib. I guess because he hasn't done media yet, but
he always does on a match week, though.
At some point there will be a press conference where Roy is out, and that'll be interesting.
Like it's also very telling if Roy Keane doesn't do a press conference this week, which might also be an option they might elect, because as far as I know, he's always up for media in the days in the lead up to a match, particularly a competitive one. So he should be up today or tomorrow.
Redden and Cronin have had a good impact at Leinster Rugby. Always wanted them to do well. Never lessen the rivalry. The Carbery situation isn't entirely new, says Neil Casey. I think there's a significant difference between Redden and Cronin, though, in that they didn't go straight from when they were already established Irish internationals, Carbery's clearly somebody who could have had a very long career there. Redden and Cronin both had to leave to find their way. Redden wasn't getting a game under Declan Kidney and decided he had to get out of there, and ended up going off and having a brilliant career in England, and comes home. Cronin, likewise, as far as I remember, came from Connacht, right? That's that pathway.
Joey Carbery wasn't going to get the big games this year. That's ultimately what the argument was, wasn't it? That it is as much for Joey Carbery as it is for Irish rugby.
Dara Toole says, so Sean Cronin shouldn't be playing at all then, from Munster, who never picked him when Connacht took him in, coached him, and he was poached by Leinster. I mean, if you can expand on the point a little bit for us, Dara. We're trying to make this a more nuanced conversation than it was a couple of months ago.
Yeah,
but it's hard.
It is hard. It is hard when you care a bit about some of the parties involved, particularly your tribal nature towards everything from a thigh. Anything in kind of lily white colours or anything with an association to Kildare, you're just like, I'm going to jump on that bandwagon and support it to the nth degree. But also you love Leinster rugby, so you're just a little bit confused.
Young Footballer of the Year?
David Clifford.
Howard?
Or Howard will probably win it, but for me, David Clifford.
No, it's Howard.
Is it confirmed? Do you have the list in front of you?
I don't have the list in front of me, but it has to be Howard.
Have you got a leak in the?
I mean, Brian Howard has established himself as one of the best players on the best team of all time. David Clifford had a really good season, but Brian Howard is the Footballer of the Year.
No,
Young Footballer of the Year.
It was Brian Howard had an absolutely exceptional season. They're both going to get All-Stars. David Clifford edges it for me just because of some of the outrageous things he did this year. That
Are you just being a bit tribal there? Is that what's going on?
No, like I mean, if GAA was a professional sport and David Clifford went and played for a different county, I would just like support my team. You know, I'd be happy to see him do well, but it wouldn't diminish my love for the sport or diminish the rivalry. As that's your point.
James Gill talking about Dub's dominance. Kerry have 5 minors in a row. They'll be the team to stop Dublin's drive for 5. Yeah, was this year's minor under 17?
It was, yeah.
So they were basically kids, and it'll be like a good 5 years before you see any of those.
Well, the thing is, because it was under 17, there wasn't a single player who was there last year. So Peter Keane has taken an entirely new squad, won another All Ireland. Jonathan says the real question is: will any other county ever win another 1 in a row? I have hope. In my lifetime, anyway, I hope to see another.
Candy says he still thinks it's Clifford for Young Footballer of the Year. There's a good chance Clifford gets it. I think that probably the goal. I think ends up swinging people's minds. And look, he performed in a team that was underperforming, and that's the hardest thing for anybody to do. But I just thought that the catches in the All Ireland final. It's like it's the All Ireland final.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's not like he's
not like a last minute goal in Clonus to save your bacon in the championship.
Yeah, but still. He was not quailed at any point by the occasion, and when the team needed players to play well, in that first 15 minutes he was playing well, Jack McCaffrey was playing well, and Kieran Kilkenny was playing well, but that was it. Well, Kilkenny didn't really touch the ball in the first 10-12 minutes actually.
Yeah, which kind of made the rest of his performance all the more impressive, the way he managed to edge his way into the game.
A kid called Brian Howard rocked up to the seniors, slotted in seamlessly, and played his part in the county, retaining the All-Ireland Young Player of the Year material, says Juan José. It is Young Player of the Year material. I think if he gets beaten, he'll be a bit...
like, people talk about how...
Brian Howard wouldn't lace Clifford's boots, says Canty. Here's the thing. We probably will get to see them going head-to-head. I mean...
Not a proper marking sort of head-to-head.
Into the future, is there never a time when... Clifford becomes an outside
might see Brian
forward.
Howard versus Sean O'Shea. That might be a good kind of young battle with years to come. But like people talk about Gaelic football being screwed. This is arguably the best kind of battle we've had for Young Player of the Year.